How did humanity reach a point where leaving Earth became thinkable at all? For most of history, humanity did not imagine leaving Earth. Civilizations rose and collapsed beneath the same sky. Empires expanded across continents. Religions imagined heavens beyond human reach. Oceans were crossed. Mountains were climbed. The poles were mapped. But no matter how far humanity traveled, every ambition, every war, every idea unfolded within the same planetary boundary. Earth was not merely where civilization existed. It was the horizon that defined existence itself. The Industrial Revolution accelerated movement, compressed distance, and transformed the scale of production, yet humanity still remained enclosed within the same environment that had shaped every previous generation. The sky inspired imagination, navigation, mythology, and science, but it remained fundamentally inaccessible. It could be observed, it could be studied, it could not be entered. Then, in July 1969, human beings left Earth and arrived somewhere else. Apollo 11 is often remembered as a technological triumph or a Cold War victory. It was both. But neither explanation fully answers the larger question. Why did civilization decide to leave Earth at all? The Moon offered no new continent to settle, no trade route to control, and no immediate solution to the problems facing humanity. Yet for the first time in history, human beings stood on another world and looked back at their own. That image altered something profound. Earth was no longer experienced only from within. It became visible from outside. A planet suspended in darkness, small, silent, and suddenly observable as a whole. The unquestioned center of human existence had become an object in space. The moon landing did not erase political conflict or transform human nature. The rivalries that produced Apollo remained intact. The Cold War continued. Nations competed. Power still organized technological achievement. Yet something larger had occurred beneath those familiar structures. A civilization that had evolved entirely within one world had crossed beyond it. The mission challenged one of humanity's oldest assumptions, that civilization belonged entirely to Earth. After 1969, Earth was no longer the unquestioned limit of human action, imagination, or possibility. The boundary that had contained all previous history had, for the first time, been physically surpassed. For most of human history, the world appeared bounded not only by geography, but by perception itself. The sky stretched overhead as something immense yet unreachable, while human existence unfolded entirely below it. Civilizations developed different explanations for the heavens, but one condition remained constant. Human civilization existed entirely within a terrestrial world from which there seemed to be no departure. Expansion occurred across the surface of the Earth, rather than beyond it. The great exploratory ages gradually enlarged the known world. Maritime empires crossed oceans that earlier civilizations had feared or mythologized. New trade routes connected continents that had previously developed in relative isolation. Geography became increasingly measurable, mappable, and navigable. Yet even these transformations preserved the same underlying condition. Human movement remained confined to the planet itself. The horizon expanded, but the world remained Earth. The Industrial Revolution accelerated this process dramatically. Railways compressed distance across continents. Steamships reduced the practical scale of oceans. Telegraph networks allowed communication to move faster than physical travel for the first time in history. By the early 20th century, aviation further transformed humanity's relationship with space and movement. Flight altered the perception of distance itself. But even aviation retained an important limit. Aircraft conquered the atmosphere without escaping the planet beneath them. Humanity had achieved movement through the skies, while still remaining entirely enclosed within Earth's gravitational and environmental boundaries. Even modern science preserved this condition psychologically. Astronomy revealed that Earth was not the center of the universe, but this knowledge changed perception more than experience. Human beings could calculate the movement of distant planets, study the structure of galaxies, and measure the age of stars while never physically departing the environment in which all human life had evolved. The cosmos could be understood intellectually while remaining inaccessible materially. By the middle of the 20th century, however, this boundary was beginning to weaken. Advances in physics, engineering, and rocketry increasingly suggested that space might no longer belong exclusively to imagination or theory. The atmosphere was no longer perceived as an absolute ceiling. It was becoming a frontier. For the first time, leaving Earth began to appear technically achievable. If humanity could cross that boundary, then civilization itself would no longer be fully defined by the planet on which it originated. For all previous generations, Earth had been humanity's unquestioned condition of existence. Not simply home, but limit. The 20th century became the first period in history when that limit began to appear negotiable. The possibility of leaving Earth did not explain why humanity would actually attempt it. The path to the moon did not emerge from peaceful cooperation or detached scientific curiosity alone. It emerged from war, rivalry, and the geopolitical pressures of the 20th century. The technologies that would eventually carry human beings beyond Earth were born within the logic of conflict. During the Second World War, Nazi Germany developed the V-2 rocket, the first long-range guided ballistic missile in history. Designed as a weapon, the V-2 became the first machine capable of briefly leaving the lower atmosphere before descending toward its target. The rocket pointed toward two futures simultaneously. One was military, the other extended far beyond warfare itself. When the war ended, both the United States and the Soviet Union moved rapidly to secure German rocket technology and recruit the scientists who had developed it. The emerging Cold War transformed scientific advancement into a strategic necessity. Technological superiority increasingly became associated not only with military capability, but with ideological legitimacy. Each superpower sought to demonstrate that its political system could better organize modernity, industry, science, and the future itself. Space became part of that competition before human beings had even entered it. In October 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Technically, the satellite itself was simple. A metallic sphere transmitting radio signals as it circled the planet. Symbolically, however, its impact was enormous. Humanity had placed an artificial object into orbit around the Earth. The psychological effect in the United States was immediate. Sputnik suggested that the Soviet Union possessed not only advanced rocket technology, but potentially the capability to deliver nuclear weapons across continents. More profoundly, it created the impression that the future itself might belong to the Soviet system. Space technology became inseparable from political prestige. The sky was no longer a passive backdrop above geopolitical conflict. It had become a strategic domain. The competition accelerated rapidly. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to travel into space and orbit the Earth. A Soviet citizen had become the first representative of humanity to leave the planet. Once again, the Soviet Union appeared technologically ahead. Only weeks later, President John F. Kennedy addressed the American Congress with a proposal that initially seemed almost irrational in scale. The United States, he declared, would commit itself to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. At the time, such a goal bordered on the unimaginable. Human beings had only recently entered space at all. The technological obstacles were immense. The costs would be staggering. The risks were obvious. Yet the proposal reflected a deeper logic operating within the Cold War itself. Apollo was never only about the moon. It was about demonstrating organizational capacity on a civilizational scale. The ability to coordinate science, industry, engineering, education, computation, logistics, and political will toward a single objective. The moon became the symbolic terrain upon which competing systems attempted to prove their superiority. The space race was therefore not merely technological competition, it was a struggle over historical legitimacy. Both superpowers understood that achievements in space carried psychological force far beyond their immediate practical value. Rockets, satellites, and astronauts became symbols of national vitality and ideological momentum. To lead in space was to appear aligned with the future itself. This transformed Apollo into one of the largest mobilization projects in modern history. Hundreds of thousands of engineers, technicians, scientists, factory workers, mathematicians, and administrators became connected to the program. Enormous financial resources were directed toward a project whose immediate material returns remained uncertain. The moon landing mattered precisely because it exceeded ordinary utility. No direct economic necessity required human beings to stand on the lunar surface in 1969. Apollo represented something different. A civilization attempting to demonstrate what it believed itself capable of becoming. The Saturn V rocket embodied this transformation physically. Larger and more powerful than any machine previously constructed by humanity, it represented industrial civilization concentrated into a single instrument designed to escape Earth's gravity. Millions of individual components functioning together with extraordinary precision in order to transport human beings beyond their native world. By the late 1960s, the race had become increasingly urgent. Soviet successes had established early dominance, but American industrial capacity was accelerating rapidly. NASA conducted successive missions that gradually expanded operational confidence in space. Then, on July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 launched from Cape Kennedy. For the first time in history, human beings were attempting to reach another world. Apollo 11 carried 3 astronauts away from Earth and toward the moon. Millions watched the launch live across televisions and radio broadcasts, while hundreds of thousands gathered near Cape Kennedy to witness the event directly. The Saturn V rocket rose slowly above the launch platform, before accelerating upward with overwhelming force, carrying within it the accumulated ambition of an entire technological civilization. For several minutes, the rocket remained visible against the sky. Then it disappeared beyond ordinary human sight. The journey unfolded across nearly 4 days. Inside the spacecraft, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins moved farther from Earth with each passing hour. The planet that had contained all human history gradually diminished into distance. The physical distance traveled mattered, but so did the psychological transition occurring alongside it. Human beings were no longer merely flying across the Earth or orbiting above it. They were moving away from it entirely. By July 19th, Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit. Human beings now circled another world. The moon appeared profoundly different from how generations had imagined it from Earth. Silent, airless, a landscape shaped not by life, but by impact. dust, and immense geological isolation. The familiar object visible in the night sky revealed itself as a physical environment entirely indifferent to human existence. The following day, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the lunar module Eagle and separated from the command module where Michael Collins remained in orbit above them. As Eagle began descending toward the lunar surface, the mission entered its most dangerous phase. Problems emerged almost immediately. The onboard guidance computer became overloaded with unexpected data alarms. Communication remained tense. Fuel reserves declined rapidly as Armstrong manually adjusted the landing trajectory to avoid hazardous terrain. Unlike previous exploration voyages in human history, there could be no rescue mission waiting beyond the horizon. For a brief period, the landing existed in uncertainty. Then, on July 20th, 1969, the message arrived. The Eagle has landed. The sentence itself was simple. Its implications were not. Humanity had physically reached another world. Several hours later, Armstrong descended the ladder of the lunar module and stepped onto the surface of the moon. Moments afterward, Buzz Aldrin joined him. Together, the two astronauts moved across a landscape no human being had ever touched before. Yet perhaps the most historically significant image of Apollo 11 was not the astronauts themselves. It was the Earth visible above the lunar horizon. Seen from the moon, Earth appeared transformed. Borders disappeared. Nations vanished into distance. The political divisions that organized human conflict became invisible at planetary scale. What remained visible was a solitary world suspended within darkness. For most of history, humanity had experienced Earth only from within. Apollo altered that perspective permanently. The planet became observable externally, as one object among many within a larger cosmic environment. This shift carried profound symbolic weight. The moon landing demonstrated technological capability, but it also transformed human perception. Earth was no longer simply the background condition of existence. It became something that could be seen, measured, departed from, and eventually returned to. The mission itself lasted only days. Scientific experiments were conducted, samples collected, and preparations made for departure. In material terms, the immediate practical achievements of Apollo 11 were limited. Human civilization did not suddenly transform into an interplanetary society. But historical significance does not emerge only from immediate utility. Sometimes it emerges from moments that redefine what becomes possible. Earth remained humanity's home, but it was no longer its entire horizon. The significance of Apollo 11 extended far beyond the scientific data collected on the lunar surface or the geopolitical victory claimed by the United States. Empires crossed continents, maritime powers traversed oceans, industrial economies transformed landscapes and compressed distance through infrastructure, machinery, and communication. Again and again, civilizations attempted to extend their reach beyond existing boundaries. But Apollo represented a different kind of expansion. The moon offered no immediate agricultural wealth, trade routes, or population centers to control. In practical terms, the mission appeared difficult to justify. The financial costs were immense. The risks were extraordinary. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and workers devoted years of labor toward an achievement with uncertain material return. The mission demonstrated that civilizations do not act only through material necessity. They also act through symbols, imagination, and the desire to transcend perceived limits. The moon landing became possible not because it solved an immediate survival problem, but because it embodied a vision of what technological civilization believed itself capable of becoming. In this sense, Apollo was as much psychological as scientific. The Cold War provided the political conditions that made the project possible. The United States and the Soviet Union competed for military superiority, ideological legitimacy, and global influence. Space achievements became symbols within that rivalry. Rockets, satellites, and astronauts demonstrated not merely technical skill, but the organizational strength of entire political systems. Yet Apollo exceeded the logic that produced it. The Saturn V rocket was constructed as an instrument of national prestige, but the images transmitted from the moon quickly escaped narrow political ownership. Around the world, millions watched human beings step onto another planetary body for the first time. The event became difficult to contain within the boundaries of ordinary nationalism. For a brief moment, technological achievement appeared to operate at the scale of the species itself. Apollo demonstrated a level of coordination rarely seen in human history. Hundreds of thousands of individuals working across institutions, industries, and disciplines contributed to a single objective. The achievement revealed not only what modern civilization could imagine, but what it could organize itself to accomplish. The moon landing therefore reflected a particular relationship between power and imagination. The project required advanced mathematics, computing systems, engineering precision, industrial coordination, and state financing on unprecedented scales. But these material structures alone could not explain Apollo completely. The mission also depended upon collective belief. A society had to imagine the impossible as achievable before it could organize itself toward accomplishing it. Confidence in technology, confidence in scientific progress, confidence that human intelligence could continue overcoming previous limits through organization, calculation, and innovation. The moon landing represented the high point of a 20th-century belief that technological advancement could continuously expand the horizon of human possibility. At the same time, Apollo also revealed the fragility of that confidence. The achievement proved extraordinarily difficult to sustain. After the initial lunar missions, public enthusiasm gradually diminished. Economic pressures, political tensions, and changing priorities reduced the momentum that had carried humanity toward the moon. The long-term colonization of space remained far more difficult than many had imagined in 1969. Apollo demonstrated that technological capability does not automatically produce permanent transformation. A civilization may reach extraordinary thresholds without fully reorganizing itself around them afterward. The moon landing opened the possibility of becoming an interplanetary species, but it did not guarantee that such a future would immediately follow. Yet the symbolic transformation remained. Apollo did not guarantee humanity's future beyond Earth. It demonstrated something more immediate. A civilization could imagine a goal once associated with fantasy, organize itself around that vision, and transform it into reality. Apollo 11 did not eliminate political conflict or transform daily life overnight. Wars continued, rivalries persisted. Most human life remained grounded in the same concerns that had shaped earlier generations. Yet something fundamental had nevertheless changed. Earth could be experienced not only from within, but from outside. The new perspective carried consequences extending beyond science or geopolitics. Earth no longer appeared infinite in human perception. From the moon, the planet looked small against the surrounding darkness, suspended within an environment largely indifferent to human existence. Oceans, continents, and atmospheres that had once seemed immeasurable now appeared finite, fragile, and singular. For most of history, Civilizations defined themselves primarily against one another. Empires competed for territory. Nations constructed identities through borders, languages, religions, and political systems. Human conflict unfolded within a world experienced as internally divided, yet externally unquestioned. Apollo introduced a different perspective. Seen from space, Earth became not merely the setting of human history, but a shared planetary condition. This did not erase division or produce global unity. Political conflict remained deeply rooted within modern civilization, but the image of Earth from space nevertheless entered human consciousness permanently. The planet became visible not only as homeland, but as environment, a world inhabited collectively, regardless of political separation. The significance of Apollo therefore lies not only in the journey to the moon itself, it lies in the perspective that journey made possible. Earth remained the center of human life, but it no longer appeared as the entirety of the human world. Seen from outside, the planet became both smaller and more significant, a finite environment carrying every civilization, conflict, achievement, and ambition within a much larger cosmos. For all previous generations, Earth had been the horizon. Now, it could be seen.